Hi, I'm Laura. This is The Practice Connects. This is episode 2. This is how we do hard things. It's really, really interesting to have conversation with everyone, and thank you so much for the feedback on the first episode. This is, again, another way to connect off of the mat, essentially bringing what we practice in studio to the rest of our lives. And that journey is so exciting and hard and scary and so many layers, right? Because we're nuanced and we're human, and there's a dichotomy of what is true for us in any given moment. And so by understanding and recognizing what is actually our truth versus what is the story versus what is our expectation versus so many different things, we can start to filter out what our real experience is. Now, having said that, of course, with trauma, with PTSD, there are actual chemical changes in the brain, and this doesn't necessarily apply to that. This is, of course, if we're feeling resistance or stress in a general sense. There is also another level where we're feeling chronically stressed. And so I'll touch on a few of these pieces a little bit throughout how to do hard things. Okay, so the first thing is to understand that stress is not inherently bad. We perceive stress as bad, but it's actually not. It's simply information. Biologically speaking, we've had releases of chemicals, of hormones in our body to help us exist, to help us survive. And that is narrated by our fight or flight. You might have heard of our nervous system, our fight or flight, our flee, and our fawn. And so those are part of our sympathetic nervous system that helps us understand and filter what's going on and how do I survive this experience. Now, when we're constantly stimulated and we're not able to move into our parasympathetic state, which is our rest and digest, then we start to eventually become chronically stressed. That alters our reality. That alters how we're receiving information, which means that sometimes circumstances can feel scarier than what is actually going on. Now, I know you know what I'm talking about, because how often do you read an email and you react immediately and you say, how dare they say this to me? Right? Same with road rage, right? We often are in these circumstances where we're like, how dare they? And I can't believe they're doing this. And all this reactive feeling that exists in our self, which of course is true because that's our experience of it. We need to be able to analyze and take a step back, create a space, create a breath between response and reaction in order to determine, is this really happening, or is it a story that I've made up around the thing that is happening? Now, what's super, super interesting is as we've collected experiences in our past, they've helped create the story, create the neural pathways in our brain. So our brain starts to predict what's going to happen. It's so fascinating, but is it helpful? That's the question. So if we've been in an experience where we have experienced road rage and someone has crashed into our car, then we also will bring that truth forward in the story, even though it's not necessarily likely that we'll have that same experience in the future. But our bodies are trying to help us survive. Our bodies are trying to help us understand what's going to happen. It's also the way we express the least amount of energy. So our bodies are always trying to find the least resistance path forward, which isn't necessarily the most helpful. So all of this to say is, when we're in challenging situations, when we feel resistance, it's so important to slow down. Now, it's also really important to have practices that allow for you to experience these experiences so you can help yourself understand what sort of reaction and what sort of response you want to have moving forward. For instance, I have the road rage. I get really angry. I'm on my way to class and this car will not get out of my way. And I say, I can't believe this person is not even thinking about me. Why are they not going the speed limit? I have to get to where I am. Pause. Is this really linked to my survival? No. So we start to recognize the reaction and we pause and then we get curious. Is this linked to my survival? No. Okay. Why am I so upset with it? They're inconveniencing me. That's fine, right? So we know that this inconvenience is happening and that's totally fine. Can I let someone know that I'm gonna be late? Can I give myself more time the next time I'm leaving so this doesn't inconvenience me? Can I take a breath and soak in the gift of the extra moment in my car? Now, I'm gonna link all of this to my experience moving through panic in my swim in the triathlon I just raced, in the Olympic distance triathlon I just raced, because this conversation has been coming up. And I know you might not want to hear it, and that's okay, but I want to relate this personal story so that you understand how I've incorporated it in real time. So I have a history of panicking while swimming in open water. This doesn't happen in the pool. It only happens if I'm trying to swim in open water. Don't know what it is. I can play in a lake, I can swim in the ocean, I can float. All of these things are fine. There's something about the swimming in the open water that freaks me out. Okay, so is there something that happened in my past that created this panic? Not particularly, nothing stands out. Okay, fine. So what do? I start by putting myself in that uncomfortable situation, little bit by little bit. I start going into the open water. I go with friends, I go with people, and I say, hey, I'm working on this thing. Can you help me with it? So I'm leaning on things around me and I'm working internally. And I start breathing slow. So I'm finding that space again between story and reaction. And I'm starting to be okay. So now this is the somatic experience, the somatic element of practicing being in an uncomfortable and a stressful situation. And I remind myself that I am okay and this is not a survival issue. I'm okay. I know how to swim. I have people around me. I am safe. This is not a life or death situation. So as I continue to practice going in open water and breathing and finding softness and stillness in this stressful situation, like we do in a burpee in class, like we do when we're holding poses for long periods of time and our mind creates that story, we're creating the opportunity for ourselves to find response rather than reaction. So that when you're racing in an open water swim, you know you can make yourself go forward and through. And maybe you enjoy moments of it. Okay, we can do hard things. Hard things don't necessarily mean life or death. And what you're feeling is valid. Let's get curious about it. Let me know any questions that you have. Thank you so much for joining along.